Hi there guys, welcome to this week's session. Workout is paused for now, just a couple of little bits before we get started as usual. Firstly, we've got another kind of sprint type set, peak power type set today, so you want to check before we start your best for 2 minutes and 1 minute. Okay, so what your personal bests are for that power over those 2 minute, 1 minute intervals for last 30 days, last 90 days, and all time, so you can have a gauge of it's the same as last time basically. The targets are a little bit arbitrary and kind of guesswork. You don't quite have functionality. Do anything else unfortunately. One day. So yeah, we've got the 2 minute efforts and the 1 minute efforts. So you just want to make sure you know what your best power is for those durations, so you can really kind of push yourself to get the most out of yourself for this session. I've chosen the easy hill climb lap again. It's easy. And I'm going to be a bit more on it and turn around at the top this time. So last time I spent first, I think it's 2 efforts. I was struggling to get a gear. I'm going to be erg mode off the entire way through so that we don't have tech issues like I did last time, switching between Bluetooth and ANT+, blah blah blah. You can start in erg mode if you like, but you are going to need to turn it off before we hit those 2 minute efforts. We'll remind you before we get there. So yeah, when the timer in the top left gets to 10 minutes, I'll start the workout and we'll get going. So you've got about just under 30 seconds before we get cracking. I've got it on terrain mode all the way through. I'd probably recommend doing that, to be honest. The warm-up's a warm-up. It doesn't need to be exact, but what you don't want to be sticking around too much with this. So terrain mode I'd suggest, or erg mode on and then turn it off later. But go on to terrain mode, make sure you got a nice steady hill to do this work on. So ready to go in 2, 1, okay. Workout started. Here we go. Got a nice long warm up because these are some big efforts. 2 and 1 minutes. 2 minutes. You're very much at the end of the anaerobic range. When we do CP testing, we do a 3 minute test for your anaerobic capacity. But for the 3 minutes, there is going to be quite a big aerobic component to that. It's kind of finding out where you drop off, where your upper limit is, so to speak. So these 2 minute efforts, these are, let's just be honest, they're rank. Right on that cusp between anaerobic shifting into kind of like VO2 max, right on the edge. But they're really good, particularly if you're doing any kind of off-road or crit racing. These types of effort really sort of build some grit. So in today's chat, thanks again to Nick for this one. We're just going to talk about bike handling a little bit for time trialing and road racing. Now obviously all of this is relevant to all of you. Doesn't matter what your discipline is. The key principles I'm going to be talking about and some of the minutiae is going to be important to all of you. Okay, so don't switch off if you're a triathlete. In fact, I would say the stereotype for triathletes and their handling skills is such that if you are a triathlete, this is one for you. Make sure you listen. Okay. So yeah, got a nice long warm up. So I'm going to be covering our chat hopefully in the warm up. Then we've got some 30-second efforts just to open up the legs. And then we've got two 2 minute efforts, full gas efforts with 3 minutes in between. And then we've got a long recovery section, 10 minutes in zone 2 before we hit the 4 1 minute efforts. So in total we've got 6 intervals, 2 of which are 2 minutes long, 4 of which are 1 minute long. Okay, so let's get stuck into our chat as we've got a nice long 12 minutes. And before we get started, put my fan on and open up the door. Fine, let's keep pedaling, don't I? Because the workout pauses, I think. Although it seems not to. So I'm going to pedal up a little bit, and I'm going to try and open the door and hit the fan without the workout stopping. Here you go. This is what I really should have remembered from last time. But there you go. Still getting used to being back on the bike and doing these sessions. Yeah, hopefully, maybe a second or two lost there. So yeah, bike handling. Now, when I started trying to put some notes together for this, I thought, flipping it, how am I going to talk 10-15 minutes about bike handling whilst I'm on a turbo? Because it is, and it still is, really a chat that you'd want to do in person on the bike and sort of demonstrating. But I actually find there is a real surprising amount to talk about. So I'm going to break it up into kind of time trialing specific stuff, road racing specific stuff. Before we get into that, I'm going to start with the real fundamentals. And for some of you guys, this will be a little bit patronising, teaching you to suck eggs, but I actually think for most of you guys, it might not be, because it's not like when you jump on a bike, there's always someone there to give you the real fundamentals of bike handling. A lot of you just kind of work out for yourself. So yeah, hopefully this will be useful for absolutely everyone. So let's talk about some real fundamentals. A lot of this actually you would have heard me say before, but the first kind of core one is be really relaxed in the upper body. You know, I talked about it on the turbo in terms of drawing your shoulders down, chin up, opening up your chest so you're not compressing your airways. That's a physiological reason. But in terms of handling, you want to be really relaxed as well. Because like if your elbows are locked out like this, and you're stiff in your shoulders, that means any little bump is going to be magnified. Your elbows should be soft, should be bent, like 15 degrees or something, shoulders relaxed, away from your ears. And that means they'll act like shock absorbers. So, I know in extreme cases, if you're already stiff and tense, you know, you're nervous and scared, particularly if you're off-road, that sort of stiffness can actually see you come off your bike because you can't sort of absorb any kind of mistakes, any kind of bumps that you're not expecting. Okay, particularly if you're nervous, if it's like a steep descent, you're not maybe that experienced. It's a really hard thing to make yourself do, is to relax. But you just got to say it and just, you know, you hear my voice in your head just sort of saying shoulders down, relax the elbows, relax the hands, you know. If you've got like a steep winding descent, you know, you're in the Alps or something, or a broken road in the UK, probably the most common scenario. Yeah, just try and relax. And just kind of one small point on that is, you know, in those scenarios you find out whether you've got decent brakes or not. I would suggest that upgrading your brakes is a really good shout if you're nervous about it. I just remember like sister's bike, her first bike. It was a decent spec bike, you know, sort of just one nudge above entry level. Group set was fantastic. And the brakes, oh, and you'd be really surprised how expensive kit doesn't always mean there isn't always an equal level of attention paid across the group set. You know, the other element of that is wheels. I'm not going to go into this, just a quick one, but I'm always surprised how you can spend a shitload of money on a bike and then get these grubby little wheels, some grubby little brakes. So yeah, just one thing to have in your mind. Braking often isn't seen as like a performance element. It bloody is if you're trying to stay on the bike. Okay, so yeah, mainly though, try and be relaxed. You know, use those arms as shock absorbers. And we're talking road, off-road, time trial. Let's face it, in the UK our roads are shit. There's always something unexpected. And if you're all rigid, you're going to feel every little deviation. Another kind of key basic element is if you're going into a corner, we want your pedal up on the inside. So if I'm turning left now, my left foot is up. Okay, going around that corner. I'm turning left, my right foot is down. Okay, so let me just explain that again. So I'm coming up to a left-hand turn, braking, left foot is up, leaning into the corner, right foot is down. Okay, so what this does is, one, it stops pedal strikes. So when you're banking the bike over, you can actually hit the pedal on the ground on the inside if you're not careful. And also you can do that heading too soon before you've exited the corner. So having that pedal up on the inside of the turn just helps to keep the bike balanced, keeps some weight on the outside, and kind of pushes the tyre into the ground. You think about it the other way, you had to have that down. That is shifting all your weight onto the inside and all the way into the inside of the tyre, and you're really at risk of washing out as you begin to sort of bank into the turn. So yeah, we really want to maintain some weight on the outside as we're leaning in. Okay, so that's number 2. The third really key point is on the braking, particularly like heavy braking on a downhill, you want to shift your weight to the back of the saddle. In some circumstances, really steep, beyond the back of the saddle. And what this does is it just keeps the rear wheel planted and helps you to maintain traction on the braking, and kind of really weights the rear brake, and it kind of unloads the front end a little bit, kind of just minimize the risk of that front wheel washing out, sliding out. So on heavy braking, shift your weight backwards a little bit, get all your weight over the rear wheel. Okay, which leads me on to the 4th element. You'll hear all kinds of chat, and I get so frustrated with this because it's not difficult. You'll hear like people saying like, you want to apply your braking evenly, and I've heard one very good rider who was saying to people, yeah, you want to really make sure you use the front brake more than your rear brake. I don't know, he's a smart guy as well. I'm hoping he just kind of, had a little brain fade. You want to use your rear brake much more than your front. And it's really simple, guys. Actually, I need those. Don't know why I took them off, can't really see. You want to use your rear brake more than your front. Doesn't mean you don't use your front brake at all. Just mean the bias, the amount of power, the amount of grip you put through that rear brake is more than the front. And there are times where you just have to smash both brakes. An emergency situation. Sorry, it's an alarm because the dog's slow cooked ragu is ready. Pampered little pooch. Yeah, try and use your rear brake more generally than your front, because that's where the majority of your weight is going to be, and it'll just help keep the bike planted. And also, if you do go heavy on the rear brake and the rear wheel locks up, hell of a lot safer sort of sliding out the back than if you lock up front. You can allow the rear to slide a little bit and correct, but if the front locks, you're probably going down. So emphasis on the rear brake. Use the front brake, but just be a bit more gentle with it. So if that locks, then you're not going to have a good day. And then kind of like the final key basic element, fundamental element is, and this is mostly for off-road, but still relevant cornering on-road, is look in front, look down the trail, look down the road, or look round the corner. Basically just not directly down or really close to your front wheel. Okay, our minds are absolutely incredible in that if you are looking down the road or the trail, say 10 meters or so instead of 2, your brain will compute everything in front of you, and so the terrain immediately in front of you will be taken care of. Your brain will just look after it, even if you're not directly looking at it. And you want to try and pick your exit to the trail, that little section of trail, or the exit to the corner, and that's where your mind will take you. Or it's like in skiing. I'm not a big skier, but remember when I was learning to ski, an instructor said something that's always stuck with me. That if you're looking at a cliff edge, you're going to the cliff edge. Your brain will take you there. So, you know, likewise, if you're looking too far down, you know, that's all you've got to compete with, and you don't have time to react. Likewise, you know, you're looking at a bad bit of trail, your brain's going to take you there. Look at the good bit of trail, and you'll go that way. And it's the same in cornering on the road. You want to look towards the exit of the corner, and you know your brain will kind of just take care of the rest. Okay, so yeah, let me just run through those quickly, and then I'll just take a pause, and we'll finish the rest of it in a big break between the 2 and 1 minute efforts. So be relaxed. Okay, your shock absorbers, remember your elbows. Pedal up on the inside of the corner. So if I'm turning left, my left foot is up. Under braking, shift your weight backwards. Try to use your rear brake more than your front, or generally bias towards the rear brake. Keep the bike planted at the back. And then look where you want to go. Don't look down, okay? So there's just some really key fundamental points, which you may or may not have heard before. And I don't think they ever lose significance. When I'm on the trails, I'm always having to tell myself, look up, stop looking down, look up. Because it's instinctive. You want to look down, like, oh, where's my wheel going? I've got to avoid that route. And you end up staring at the route and just going towards it, rather than like, right, where's my exit point? And you'll just get there. Yeah, so it's not something, even though it's quite basic stuff, it's not stuff that loses relevance. Quite often you will have to tell yourself a lot to comply with those key principles. Anyway, right, so coming towards the end of the warm-up now, just turn my guy around so I can sit on this hill. We've got 3 30-second efforts. They're just about 120% of FTP. So don't worry about too much, it's just an acceleration. Just opening up the legs a little bit. Just trying to get switch muscle fibers going basically. So try and loosely hit the target. Don't worry about it too much. Going back. Last 2 seconds. And relax. Just felt a little bit of like flex. I was like, oh, is that the handlebars? No, it's just the front tyre's a bit low, that's all. Little panic. Brand new carbon bars, flexing. Not really what you want. So we've got 1.5 minutes, just cruising. That's why I'm really enjoying having erg mode off at the moment. You know, my fitness doesn't exist at the moment. So just having erg mode off allows me to do these sessions just according to how I'm feeling and still hit decent numbers. I just really encourage you at the moment to give your I've spoken to a few of you in the last week, and I get a general sense that motivation might be a little bit low at the moment, and I get it, but this is the time of year where we build that strength. So if just having erg mode off and just sort of, you know, blowing through these sessions a little bit more freely helps, do it. Erg mode and being exactly precise with wattage numbers, limited benefit, particularly with the sprint stuff. So get it off, terrain mode on, whatever. And yeah, try and flow through these sessions a little bit more easily. So last 2 seconds, then we're going to go for a little nudge again. Okay, here we go. 30 seconds. Just opening up the legs, remember, this isn't a sprint. Don't have to hit the target. Just opening up the legs a touch. Another 10 seconds. Nice high cadence. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Might seem a little bit odd, your coach saying to you, like, don't follow things exactly. But I think this is actually an area where you can actually tell coaches apart as to not how good they are, but how experienced they are. They have the confidence to say, just relax, do this with a bit more freedom, and you'll get a better result. I think when a coach is really, really strict and you're not a pro, probably just sort of sends the signal that you might not be that experienced. Sorry, that isn't aimed at anyone, by the way, and probably quite an irrelevant comment, but I do have an hour session still. So just another 30 seconds and we'll go for the final warm-up nudge, and then we're going to get into it, okay? So get erg mode off now, or at least after the final 30-second nudge, because you're not going to have that long before we get into the first 2-minute effort, okay? And those 2 minutes efforts, they're hard to pace. Don't overthink it. Hopefully have your targets and just go for it, okay? Right, 10 seconds, then the final little warm-up nudge. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, that's good acceleration. Not really put yourself under too much duress. 20. 10. 5 seconds. 2. Alright. Relax. Keep pedaling. I'm going to turn my little duty around. And we're going to get ready for the first 2-minute effort. So, with this 2 minutes, you want to go hard, but I recommend not kind of wrecking yourself in the first 20 seconds. But otherwise, not going to overcomplicate it. Go hard, but just remember, you got to keep going after that 20 seconds. All right. Already got 2 of these. They're quite close together, but this first one in particular, let's really give it some, okay? Target on Training Peaks or this is a little bit arbitrary, so check your numbers. Pause it, go check your numbers now if you haven't done so, okay? We really want to see some progress on these anaerobic numbers over the winter. That's our big focus. Right. Second, so go into the big ring. Get ready to lift off for 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Here we go. So let's go. Few pedal strokes, get going. But then focus on a really high leg speed and hitting an effort I know I can definitely hold. Hopefully. Bit seconds down. Okay, coming up from halfway. Right, 1 minute, come on. Seconds. Okay, big last 20, come on. Ten. 5, 4, 3, 2. Whew. Oh man, that's long. Well done, guys. Nice easy gear. Open up. Get your breath back. Okay, so we've only got 3-minute recovery, 2.5 now. So force yourself to pick your leg speed back up. It will help the recovery. Nice easy gear, don't worry about the power target. Get your leg speed back above 80. So you have a little bit of hope of flushing out some of the lactate. This 2-minute effort, we are relying heavily on your lactic acid system. Okay. Okay, 3 minutes you're not going to be recovered. But I hope you got your breath back. This next rep is a fatigued one. Okay, so just do your best. The second effort is more like the sort of effort you'd actually be able to do in a race. Okay, so it's super relevant still. So make sure you have a look at your numbers afterwards. See what the drop off is. Spinning up. Rotate it around again. Just give me some extra more, extra road. These shoes, it's a touch too big for me. Which is fine when you're doing kind of VO2 and below, when you do sprint sets. Just find it a bit distracting. Guys, swinging up the legs, not worrying too much about the power target, but just enough to keep moving. Turn my guy around, get ready for the next one. So the benefit of that first rep is going to let you know what gearing you're going to want, and also just teach you a little something about pacing. It's not pacing in the sense of saving something, it's more about just not blowing off the roof. Okay, ready to go in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Here we go, come on. Big. It's the worst effort of the session, and then in my opinion things will be a lot easier. Stay relaxed in the shoulders, chin up. Dirty down.
I got that flow, I got that swag, I got that that your mama wish she had. I take it slow, but somehow you still last. So if you want that glow, you better relax.
Last minute. Hold 5 seconds.
I got that flow, I got that swag, I got that that your mama wish she had. I take it slow, but somehow you still last. So if
Okay, 30, come on.
better relax.
Big 20 seconds, come on, push. 10. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Oh. That is the clearest indication yet that I've lost a fair bit of fitness. But it's not real at all. Hopefully you had a better time of it. But if you found that really horrible, for me that was like 100-watt drop off, which is not normal. That's you are not fit, my son. Or at least if I'm being fair, I'm not. My fatigue resistance isn't there now. You know, I haven't been doing much base. Gonna get out for an hour, hour and a half, absolute max. So, and that is really what I was talking about at the beginning of the session about that 3-minute test you're doing CP testing. It's testing your anaerobic capacity and your fatigue resistance. So we're seeing what the drop off is over the course of that sort of final 90 seconds. So if I was to do CBT testing now, I think maybe I'd do a run at 3 minutes, but then at 12 minutes I would just not survive, because doing that first 2 minutes fresh, you know, you can do some numbers and it can hide the true story. Anyway, yeah, just thought it would be helpful for you guys to know that if you're trying it hard, that second rep really found it hard and saw a big drop off. Me too. But all it means, hopefully that kind of reinvigorates you. I hate that level of suffering where you just know this isn't hurting because I'm going deep and I'm going hard. Hurting because I'm not fit. I hate that feeling. I mean, not a tremendous amount I can do right now, but definitely galvanizes me to keep getting out on my bike. Anyway, right, let's get back to our chat, because hopefully we covered a little bit. That's why I was waffling. I wanted to get through the first couple of minutes of that recovery. So, coming back to handling, and we've got a really lovely long recovery period now, over 10 minutes. Just make sure your legs don't go to sleep. So keep pedaling upwards of 80 RPM, keep a bit of power on, keep your heart rate above 100 beats per minute, okay? And just keep pedaling nice and fluidly. But yeah, time trialing handling skills. The old binoculars on. Now you might think, actually, time trials, they don't tend to be particularly technical, so there might not be that many specific handling points to make. But there are actually a few kind of nice things to be aware of. I think the first things to talk about, let's talk about TT bikes first, because despite what I was saying, you know, TT bikes are generally still, there is a trend moving towards everything on road bikes because of the expense, etc. But TT bike is still the sort of gold standard of time trialing. But the first thing to know is, like, the geometry of a TT bike means that most of the weight of the bike itself is towards the back end, and the front end is usually very light. And what that means is that the handling will be very twitchy. And when the front end is light and twitchy, it does make it hard or harder to load the bike in corners, and there is a greater risk of that front wheel washing out. So I think the really key thing about racing on a TT bike and cornering on a TT bike is you want to make absolutely sure you've done all your braking before the corner. Okay, you want to scrub up all your speed. So when you're going around the corner, you're just focusing on banking the bike, picking your exit, hitting the apex first, and then picking your exit. You don't want to do any braking in the corner. And that goes for any type of cycling, particularly if you're on a TT bike. Okay, because you touch that front brake in a corner on a TT bike, when it's unloaded because you're sitting upright, yeah, it can be messy. So yeah, you want to do all your braking before you get to the corner. So there's an old phrase from motor racing, which is you go slow in and fast out. So you go slow into the corner, you do all your braking, and what that means is, because you're not dicking around in the middle of the corner trying to get your speed back under control, it means you can actually hit the acceleration sooner. Okay? So make sure in all cycling, but also particularly on TT bike, you do your braking in a straight line before you get to the corner. Okay? And one of the things you might not have heard there, you might not know what it means, but the apex of a corner, if I use my hands here, that's fine. Get wheel back. So imagine this kind of top bit here is the corner. The apex is the very top, the very middle of the corner. So if you come around this way, this top bit is the apex of the corner. And what you want to do is start wide and then aim for the edge of that apex. And what that does is, it means you take the straightest line around the corner, which sounds like a contradiction, but basically what I'm saying is, you start out wide and the apex is here, and starting out wide, apex is here, you're coming around, you want to glance it, so then you're taking a much sort of like simpler line and you're not having to turn as much to get around it. You know, you don't even want to think about touching your brakes, because if you're taking that nice smooth line, you shouldn't need to correct your speed. Okay? Yeah, it just means that you can do the least amount of turning, you can get onto the pedals again quicker and maintain more speed. You can get away with a little bit more on a road bike because of the more balanced weighting of it, but all I said about that cornering and on TT bike is still very applicable on a road bike. And really the main thing about time trial bikes is ensuring that you spend plenty of time on it before you race, particularly for our triathletes, because you're going to need to run off it. And this I mentioned earlier the stereotype about triathletes and their shocking handling skills, and if you've ever been to a draft legal race, it can be quite hard to argue with that, but you can be the exception. And that's all about just spending time on your TT bike, not just on the turbo, getting used to the position. Physiologically, that's important. Handling skills, you want to be out on your TT bike, and which is tough because the roads are horrible. Riding on your TT bike on the roads can be pretty grim. So it might be a case that you might need to drive somewhere or get the train out to find nicer roads or flatter roads or, you know, bigger roads, whatever the scenario. And then finally, when it comes to climbing on a TT bike, just remember that being down on the aero bars will have diminishing benefit. And quite often it's more important to maintain a nice high cadence and decent power. And anything over about 40%, your biggest goal is to overcome gravity rather than aerodynamics, because you're probably not going to be going fast enough for the aerodynamic gain of being on the skis to really matter. So if you're watching the guys like Wout van Aert going up a 10% kicker still on the TT bars, it's probably because they're going double the speed of you and I. You're right, and aerodynamics still matter. Okay, so yeah, don't blow your back out by trying to stay on the aero bars too long up a climb. If it's just a tiny little nudge, then fair, but if it's a proper climb, yeah, it's probably not worth it. So that kind of brings us more generally to road race handling skills, and it's when you're racing in a pack, and all this applies to riding in a group, because the challenge really is reacting to other people's nonsense and trying to maximize your energy conservation. So some key points: when you're in a pack, you want to touch your brakes as little as possible, and just try and judge how the pack is moving. Are they braking up front? And predict what's going to happen. You have to be alert. You cannot switch off. And quite often when packs go down, just cruising around, you know, in the Tour de France or what have you, it's because someone's drifted off, you know, not alert. And that can just be really frustrating for everybody. Okay, so really resist the urge to keep dabbing your brakes. If that front wheel, that rear wheel of the guy ahead is just creeping towards you, don't automatically panic and dab the brakes, because that will piss the people off behind you. Okay, and they then might overreact. So you want to be as smooth as possible. So you see that front wheel coming towards you, try and predict it. See the guys ahead of you, they're starting slow. The guy ahead of you is going to start slow. So just freewheel. Okay, anticipate, and try not to touch the brakes as little as possible, and behave predictably. Okay, and that leads me to the next point. You're getting out the saddle when you're in a pack. Flip both elbows like that, or say something, because when you stand up, it shifts the bike backwards. And so if you've got someone right on your rear wheel and you're standing up, pushing the bike backwards as you do so, and it's essentially going to rub against their rear wheel, they are going to be so pissed. So flick your elbows, just wait a second, because when you flick your elbows, well, that's like the international signal for there's a hazard coming up, but I don't have time to point or anything. Just like be aware. So do it before you get out of the saddle, and just let people know that something's about to happen, and they'll just, you know, soft pedal, give you a bit more space. Okay. And then when you're in a corner racing in a pack, hold your line. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about picking your exit point and kind of just imagining where you're going before you get to the corner. Hold it. Most crashes that happen in intense racing, not when you're just cruising around, but intense racing, is because some bell end tries to change lane during the corner. If the guy ahead of you is going slowly and you have to slow down as a result, tough shit. You know, that's just how it goes. Particularly at the back end of a race when the sprint's coming. No, that's just luck. That's why the best guy doesn't always win cycling. Do not try and change lane whilst you're in a corner. You will take people out, and probably yourself as well, and you will get into a fight afterwards. Similarly, when you're racing on the drops and in an aero tuck, just bear in mind, particularly when it comes to cornering, that being on the drops will shift your weight forwards a bit and weight your front wheel, and that just means that you're at slightly greater risk of losing your rear wheel, because your weight forwards unloads the rear, which means it's not as planted, and so if you've got a real tight corner, you can lose it a little. Anyway, right, I'll finish my final points in a bit, but we've got about 30 seconds till we hit the first 1 minute. Okay, so get your gearing set up, bring your mind back to it. Hopefully you recovered nicely. So this first effort, we should hopefully get a little bit towards your best. Okay, so really give it some. All right, so get ready to go in 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go, come on. Five. $30. Keep pushing. Last 20. Come on, push. Big final 15. Come on. 10. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Whew. Well done, guys. So I'm just going to cover off a couple more points whilst we're in the recovery intervals. But don't worry, I will recap at the end. So if any of this goes over your head, don't stress. And you can always watch this back or ask me to repeat anything in our chat. I talked about being on the drops, shifting your weight forwards a little bit. And a key point there is just being gentle with the brakes. So when you're on the hoods, the amount of leverage is easily manageable. When you're down the drops, you've doubled, tripled the length of the lever in your hand, which means at the other end there's greater power. So when you, oh thank God, just hit the brakes and it's like, oh shit, I hope I got a brake spacer in there. I do. When you hit the drops with the longer levers, it's going to put more force through the brake, and so there's a real much greater risk of locking your brake or just braking harder than you expect. So just be gentle on the brakes when you're, or gentler when you're on the drops, and just like TT position, really make sure you spend plenty of time on the drops, because that post hip angle, drop chest, compresses everything closer to your hip angle, and yeah, creates leverage into your lower back. So it has to be one that you've trained a lot in. So when you're out on your long rides, try and spend a fair bit of your time, as long as comfortable, on the drops, and then build it up. You don't necessarily need to do the whole ride on the drops, but it's just about building some resilience there. Okay, I've got a couple more points in the next recovery intervals, but now let's get back to the next one. We've just got 3 more efforts, guys, okay? So stay strong, stay focused. 3 more little punts. This is very much more within my remit. Those 2-minute efforts are, that's always a black spot for me. Anyway, right. So last 2 seconds, get ready to go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. .45. That's 30. Okay, let's go for 20, come on. 15. 10. 9. 5. 4. 3. 2. Oh. Good job, guys. It's 2 more of those, and then we're done. Just strip off the gearing. Nice easy gear. Spin up your legs. So, just talked about changing weighting of the bike when you're in the drops and being a bit gentle on the brakes. When it comes to exiting a corner, one thing you may have experienced in the past is pedal striking. And all that means is, you remember I talked about earlier, when you go into a corner, you lift the inside leg. What happens then, you're a little bit greedy or a little bit overexcited to then get back on the power, and you start to pedal too soon when you're banked over. What can happen is the pedal on the inside can hit the ground, and I've seen quite a few crashes like that. I've nearly crashed several times doing that myself, particularly if you race at at Bovingdon. This big long hairpin, and then it's full explosion out the corner. It probably usually into headwind, so you really want to get onto the back wheel, but it's so easy to get on the power too early and strike the floor, and it scares you when you do it. But just talking about exiting generally in racing, like that first 5 pedal strokes out of corner are absolutely crucial as to whether you stay on the wheel with a guy or girl ahead of you. And so you test it when you're warming up on the track or whatever. What is the biggest gear you can hold? Go into the corner fast, race pace, and just check out what's the biggest gear that you can be in to push out the corner. Because what you really want in that exit is torque, not necessarily high cadence, all about getting power through that back wheel and keeping it planted. Because when you hit, when you're in too easy of a gear and you try and push out, you might get wheel spin, and then you lose the rear wheel. So you might need a big heavy gear to get out of that corner fast. Right, the next one coming up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Boys, 5. Big last 20, come on. Ten. 5, 4, 3, 2. I see the gear. Spin up. Get your breath back. Hold on, guys. Catch your breath. So the final thing to mention when it comes to handling on a road race is particularly it's a hilly course, and maybe you're not the best climber there, or you just want to conserve a bit of energy. It is totally legit. Go to the front of the pack, coming into a climb, provide yourself with a bit of sliding room. You will probably piss people off, but it is fully legit. Everyone does it. I'm quite small and surprisingly heavy, so I have to, if it's anything over a minute, as you've seen today, I will almost certainly need a bit of sliding room. So go to the front, and then the hope is that as the pack pushes past you, by the time you get to the top, you're either towards the back of the pack or just on the back of it, or within closing distance, so that you don't lose the pack, so you can stay up there. It's totally legit, everyone does it, but it's a race skill, it's a handling skill. If you're not doing it and you're just getting blown out the back on the first climb, yeah, that's it basically. And quite often it's a long drive home, so do it. I do in e-races as well, like it's nothing we care about. Like, particularly if I actually think I've got a shot, I'll do it a lot, because I'm just like, well, I'll save energy, because I'll ride the climb at my own pace. I'll maybe take 10 seconds or something into the climb, and by the time they've caught up, be close to the end, and then only then do I really have to give it some. and they will have been hammering it, trying to catch me. So there's a bit of a mind games element to it as well. Being chased is better than chasing, in my opinion. Right, 10 seconds, and then we hit the final rep. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Come on, guys. Last one. Five. Thirty. Big last 20 coming up. Ready? Come on, push. 10, 5, 4, 3, 2. Relax. I hate being unfair. Terrible. A nice easy gear, loosen off the shoes. We've got a lovely 6 minutes of recovery. I'll get my breath back, and then I'll just do a quick summary so that hopefully you can actually retain something of what we talked about. It's actually quite cold once you get a bit of sweat on. I do hope life is kind and I can get on a bike a bit more. If at least I can talk properly in these sessions. Okay, so let's just go back through the fundamentals again. Fundamentally, I need my glasses. Be relaxed in your upper body. Your elbows, your shoulders nice and loose. They act as your shock absorbers, so you can handle the unexpected much more easily if you've got kind of room to compress. Okay. Pedal up on the inside of a corner, so I'm turning left foot is up. Avoid pedal striking, and just put a bit more weight on the outside of the bike, pressing the tyre into the ground, helping you stay upright. Under braking, shift your weight backwards, so more of your weight is over the rear wheel, keeping traction on that rear wheel and allowing the front wheel to be less loaded and just kind of move a little bit more freely and adapt to what you're dealing with. Use your rear brake more than your front. Okay, if you look up your rear, it's a lot easier to save than if you look up your front. And always look to your exit of the corner or look down the trail rather than what's immediately ahead of you. Your mind will do the rest, okay, unconsciously. It's one you always have to remind yourself to do. Steaming up here, I don't know if I can read the rest. So moving on to time trialing handling. You know, the bike, the geometry of it, so that the weight's over the rear, so that when you go onto the skis, your body replaces some of that weight. But what it does mean that when you're sitting upright or you're handling in the corners, the front end is usually quite twitchy. So what you definitely don't want to do is touch the brakes in the corner. So particularly on a time trial bike, do all your braking before the corner, slow in, hit that apex, that top of the curve, and exit fast. Okay. Main thing with a TT bike, spend as much time on it as possible, not just for the physiological adaptations of being in a compressed aero position, but also so you can get used to how the thing handles. It's not always easy, bearing in mind the state of the road, so you might have to make bit of an effort to get somewhere safe. And then when it comes to climbing, remember, over 5%, gravity is your biggest enemy, not aerodynamics. So don't be headstrong and spend too long on the skis, because you're just going to blow up your lower back. And then when it comes to road racing and riding in a pack, you've got to anticipate, you've got to concentrate at all times. Do not switch off. And then you want to touch your brakes as little as possible, and just be kind of guided by the pack ahead of you. Don't touch the brakes in the corner. Don't be tempted to dab the brakes when someone's wheel is coming back towards you. Free wheel, and only if they're kind of coming back to you really quick do you hit the brakes. And just be gentle and be smooth, and kind of make sure your behaviour is predictable. It's when people are chopping and changing, moving all over the place. Those are the people that get shouted at, because like you're not Mark Cavendish. We all just want to get home safe, having a bit of fun. Just hold your position, particularly in the corner. Do not change your line, otherwise you will be taking someone out, and probably yourself as well. So pick that exit, nice smooth turn, hold position. So you see, when you're on the drops, remember your weight is going to drop forwards over the front wheel. So just be a bit gentle on the brakes. Okay, spend plenty of time on the drops if you're going to be racing that position. Similar to being on a TT bike, you really need to adapt your body to riding in that position. It's not something you can just do without your back exploding. And yeah, just being careful on the brakes, because when you're down the drops, you've got a longer lever, more braking power, and it's very easy to be a bit hungry on the brakes and lock up. Okay, and then when exiting a corner, that first 5 pedal strokes is absolutely key. So you might want to be in a heavier gear than you otherwise would be. Even if it means that first 5 pedal strokes, they're really low cadence but high torque. It means that you're really kind of gripping onto the road, and every pedal revolution is going to matter, so you can stay on that wheel, and then you can shift down into an easy gear if necessary. Okay, that first 5 pedal strokes, you need as much torque as possible rather than cadence. You don't want necessarily high revolutions, because that actually might increase the risk of wheel spin, and then basically just your power going to waste. And then lastly, on a hilly course, don't be afraid to push your way to the front and give yourself some sliding room, so that by the time the climb's over, hopefully you're still within the pack. So yeah, that's all my sort of top tips, guys. You know, it's obviously quite hard on the turbo to really kind of get this message across, but we're all about signposting in these sessions more than expecting to sort of embed knowledge. So if any of this didn't make sense, or you just need a bit of clarification, or just want to talk about it a little bit more about how it might apply to your races, then bring it up. You know, let's talk about it. And then in the new year, when the weather changes, we will be able to get out and ride together and talk about this stuff some more. Anyway, there you go, guys. Well done. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I didn't. But not because I don't like these sessions, but because not in shape. Right, take care, guys. I'll see you in the next one.